should be live. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday and happy Juneteenth Eve.
That's true. It's Juneteenth Eve. How was your week? A lot of
It's been busy, but it's good. I mean, I don't have something on fire right next to me like you do. So
yes. I was just telling Anna that in Chicago this seems to always be on fire. So it's just another day in Chicago. But we built back from the ashes. That's the whole point. So well, do you want to tell us the topic of today's discussion?
yeah, so we were thinking that since it's Juneteenth tomorrow, that we could talk about allyship because neither of us are members of the Black community. Or Black communities. So that's really our role with Juneteenth, right? Is to learn how to be allies. So that's where I thought we would start. Juneteenth, for people who may not know, which I think most people do at this point, but just for clarification, Juneteenth celebrates the day that was the last group of Black people in the U.S. received the news that they were free from slavery. And that is how long it was in Texas. That is how long it took for the news to get there, which is wild considering right now, I'm stressing over, am I streaming correctly to audiences where, my biggest audience is the US, but I also have people in the UK and a few in Germany, right? And this is all like instantaneous, which is wild. But it was about 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. So
I mean,
that's
there might be some purposeful delay on that too, right?
oh, I'm
Like
sure.
it's not
Yeah. Yeah,
it was only
I'm sure it spread slower than, the burning of Atlanta.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so that is what the celebration is. One of my good friends who I used to live with is a Black woman, and she likes to say that Juneteenth is America's real Independence Day. And she doesn't say that as like an anti 4th of July thing. Like, her parents were in the military and such. Like, she's not, again, it's not either or, right? But she's like, July 4th for us doesn't mean everyone was free, but Juneteenth does.
Correct. That's true.
So
Very
I
true.
think it's a very special holiday. And with holidays like this, similar to MLK Day, um, or any holiday that's like an homage, it's what is our role here besides just enjoying some barbecue, right? Um, is there somewhere in particular you want to start, or should I
No, you
just,
can go for it. No, go for it.
okay, buckle up? Um, so I think one of the challenges that I have had, one of the blessings at the same time that I've experienced with leading people is learning how much I don't know
Mm-hmm.
and learning how much things that work for me don't necessarily work for other people. So I have absolutely, and I'm transparent about that, probably 12 years ago, the words have come out of my mouth of like, why do we have to make everything about race? If we just don't talk about it, it won't be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, I feel very differently now, but it takes a lot of learning and a lot of unlearning to get to that point. And with that can come a lot of leadership challenges because there's always something new to learn. And no matter what you do, there's always going to be somebody mad at you.
Yes.
And I think it can be hard to distinguish what voices do I listen to if nobody's going to be happy? How do I know if I'm doing it right?
Yeah, I think that that's the question that a lot of people have, and why a lot of times they don't take action or they don't actually say anything, right?
Yes.
I've have been in rooms where people were terrified of speaking about topics that are considered, how do you say it? I forgot the word now. Um, hot topics, right? Like, so I had white man saying that they will not talk to women because if they're addressing an issue, because what are they going to say? And I'm like, I don't know. If you talk to them as people, they're not going to say anything, like. But I think that there's such a the whole thing, like, oh, we can't say anything nowadays. Or I love, there is when the Me Too movement started, I remember somebody said on social media something like, oh, so we can't, so it's not okay to hug women now. And they're like, it never was okay to hug women at work. like,
Not without their consent. That was never cool. You just
yeah,
outed yourself.
so I think that there is a lot of that. A lot of people, and I think we talked a little bit about this last episode where I was talking about religion, right? Like that I, for some, because Brazil is such a melting pot of religions for everywhere. There's so many religions that you guys have never heard in here. They're very popular there. Um, that I got very used to talking about subjects that are not, and because of my personality too, I am very curious about things, right? So, uh, and I think when you approach things from that perspective of curiosity, right? Like you talk
Mhm.
to people before you say something, right? Or not being afraid to say because you're afraid of what, if you come from a place of respect, a place of curiosity, a place of integrity, people, one can sense that. And if they don't, that's their, I mean, truly, I mean, there's not, you can only improve from that. But you shouldn't steer away from learning, right? As you said, like from learning, from making mistakes because you're afraid of being canceled, right? Or being like pull an HR. Like that does not happen as often as people think it would happen. I think that I have said that to leaders before, my leaders, hey, that was not okay what you just said, right? Like maybe approach from this perspective, maybe, and it wasn't even related to me, it was related to somebody else. And I said, maybe approach from this side, approach from that side. And some of them have been very receptive, and some of them
Mhm.
have not. Now,
Mhm.
the 90% of them were all white men, and again, some of them were interested in learning. They appreciated the feedback. And on the topic of allyship, right? Like these, as I said, these were not even about me. These were about
Mhm.
Black females that were being treated differently, or they had a more difficulty standing up for themselves because they were in an environment that they were alone. They were the only ones. So then, like, every time is like Black History Month, we're like, okay, so you tell us about it. And it's like, no, no, we all talk about it,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
that I feel like that's the first thing, maybe that's the first thing we can say of like for strategies for allyship is that it's not a strategy to put all the labor on that group.
Yes, for sure.
Or that is a strategy, but it's a poor one. And it's something, when we were talking about doing this episode, something I said was, it's finding the balance between allyship and being what we call savior. And how I define the difference is allyship is listening to what that group has told you they need. They already told you. You don't have to find something new. And supporting them to make sure it happens, using the doors that you have open to you to carry that message through and
Yep,
to hold the door open for them. And maybe just hold the door open for them and like, shh, you
that's
know?
it. Yep.
And saviorism is, oh, look at me. I am such a good, you gave the woman example, I'm such a good man, or, in this case, I'm such a good white person, or whatever. And I did this, and there was actually no outcome that helped them at all. But I just want you all to know that I did something. And that's the difference. That's what I think. What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
No, I think exactly that, right? It's different than, or just saying like, oh yeah, look how much I'm doing for this group of people. And you're like, but if you're just calling them, they're like that group of people, like I unfortunately I did have leaders like, well, these people. I was like, what do you mean by these people? Who are you referring to? I knew what he was saying, but it's like, just the fact that you are saying that you can do whatever you want, but just by calling them these people, that's a very, very, what is it, derogatory, pejorative, I forgot the word, uh
Mhm.
like way to describe anybody, right? Like, oh, these people are like that. Like, who exactly are you talking about? And I kept asking because I wanted him to say something, but of course he was smart enough not to say it. And I think that people, because I've always been we had this conversation before as well, right? Like how comfortable we are in um, groups of men, like, because we grew up around them. And, I've always been I've always been around conversations that they forgot who I was, that I was a Latina, like in a room. And I'm like, you do know that does not apply, right? Like that I am right here, and that you should not have said that to begin with, if I was here or not. But I'm not part of this group. I don't care that
Mhm.
this happened recently, actually, where it was somebody 2, 3 layers above me said something about how this woman, uh, she said that she didn't feel safe in an environment. And then he was like, well, was she really, or she was just drunk? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what?
Okay, then
I'm
I
like,
would also add
sorry.
that allyship is what you say in those rooms you have access to when the door is closed and there's not a member of that group there. Because
Exactly.
something I have struggled with is, and this is me getting in that either or mindset, that binary that we've talked about like every episode of, it's yes or no, right? Is one of them is, I remember early in like 2020 when George Floyd was murdered, there was, this call for like white people need to take action. And I'd already been doing the work I do for years at that point. So I honestly at that point was like, oh, now everybody's paying attention. Like, I don't understand like how this particular situation was different than all the other
The
incidents we've
others.
seen. But okay, you like, if
We
this
were
is
in a
what does it, it
pandemic.
does it.
That's why everything, that's the main
And it was
difference.
so slow. It was so
Yeah.
slow.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, yes, white people need to take action. And then shortly after, it seemed, or, and you never know if it's the algorithms, what they're sending you. But I also heard this in my workplace of, white people need to step out of the way. And I was in that binary. I was like, well, what do you want? like, what is do you need me to do something? You need me to step out? Like, and
Yeah.
it's not an either or. And it's understanding, I think in that case, of if you're just doing it when somebody's in the room who hears it, you're doing saviorism. You want them to think you're like the good one. If you're
Yes.
doing it in a room where they're not even there and you could get away with it and you could just choose to opt in, to blend in, to be like, oh, this is a group of a bunch of white executives and I want to win brownie points for my career. That's not allyship.
Correct.
And you know, I've I've been in the situation. So during that time, I had just started a new work environment that was very toxic, and I wrote down a couple of like, what are like the 3 things that I noticed that in this case did not help from a leadership perspective, because, and number 1 is nobody named it. So I would say it was number 1, nobody named it. Number 2 was they kept saying they hear you, but taking no action. And number 3 was not showing up when things got uncomfortable because it escalated because of the first 2 things.
Yeah.
So, trying to make this brief, I was onboarded and they kept telling me how much trouble they were having, this high turnover, a lot of issues, like actual like job performance being impeded, like rebellions, like all so many terrible, like it was like shocking. I was like, oh wow, glad I moved here for this. And this was like right before the pandemic started. This was like
Okay.
literally a week before. And I was like, oh boy. And it was just, they kept using coded language of,
Mm.
they wouldn't tell me what it was, and I was so confused. They were, oh, we think maybe it's, this, or they're not really comfortable with this, or whatever. And I was like, what are you
What
trying
is
to
the
tell
problem, right?
me?
Like, if you don't tell me, how can I help, or
Yeah,
how can I
and
figure it out?
like, they literally never said it until the point where, because where I was giving a training, and the group themselves told me. Like, there was, like, a little rebellion, and I think they expected me to, like, react negatively, and I was just like, "Okay, let's talk about this." And then I went to leadership afterwards and was like, So this happened, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's been going on all year." And I was like,
And and you failed
"So
to tell
you
me that because
it blows my mind that how much, like, in our personal relationships, like, people with partners, when has it ever worked that your partner said something and you ignored it and it went away?
yeah. I think
When?
there's a lot of that. There's a lot, especially in the workplace. There is a lot of that. And I think that, you know, I started wanting to do this job because I realized that, you know, the workplace, it's a place where people supposed to be able to be themselves and have, it's a continuation of their lives, right? So I think we talked about this in the very first episode, like that I don't believe in work life balance, in work life integration. It should be one thing, right? Because you don't stop being the people. But I still, it still amazes me how people think that being at work is different than being in real life, which is outside that
Yeah,
environment.
and we especially saw that in the pandemic, right? Like, people that
Yeah.
couldn't just catch the virus at home,
And
work had to implement measures to make sure
it's
that they could safely
just,
do it.
yeah, and it's just so strange to me because why, and I don't know, I feel like the past couple weeks I have been really trying to understand what is happening in everywhere, like just everywhere. Why are people not understanding that, like, work is not a place where you playing. That's your life. That is
Mhm.
the most of your, and all of that to say is that why don't you care to make a difference? Why don't you care to be the better for your, not just for your group of people, like for your, like for your immediate, like subordinates or your immediate, but when you can do that, you can make it better for everybody else, right? And I'm not talking about just the leadership, I'm talking about everybody. Like, why don't we, and I'm saying this in a very, very general sense on this, but why people have such a hard time understanding that they can make an impact in their work, that it doesn't take a lot longer, that going to work doesn't need to be just about the task that you're doing. It can be, and it should be, about more than that, about making a difference, about making these issues less of an issue and more of like a conversation. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sorry, I don't mean to like go. I don't know if it
No,
does,
I think
but
my
it's just
no,
like,
I think my first response is it's about money. But then the IO in me gets frustrated. We talked about this, that there's a lot of research showing how much money is wasted on
yeah, but we are
turnover
people at the
and
end of the day. You know, we all are people, and I don't
right, and
understand. Like,
non-productivity. Well, I'm
yeah,
just saying, I'm an IO, so I
yeah, I
try to
get
think
it.
of, like, employer, employee. I'm saying that, we can make the argument that it doesn't save money.
Correct.
And then my second response is, it's about power. I
Yeah,
think there is this idea that is ingrained in a lot of the culture that I've been in, that if you pay for something, that you can do whatever you want to it. And I know that my perception of that is influenced by being a woman, and that it's a common thing, a common pressure women feel, even with the "let me buy you a drink" of the
that there is
"now
something.
I
Oh
owe you."
yeah, oh yeah,
That's
100%.
worth I now owe you something that's a lot more than a drink.
Yeah,
Like, that's the perception, right? Or
yeah,
the if he paid for the date, or if you're a stay-at-home mother and he works, which is rare now because very few families can live off one income anymore.
yeah.
But that if he, even though being a stay-at-home mother is labor, that's being childcare, a surrogate,
Oh
usually a house cleaner and a chef
yeah, I
for
know.
free. So I think there is that idea, and we're talking about Juneteenth, where there's also the racial dynamic of that their labor was expected to be for free, and that they had no control over their lives outside of that. You have to live here, and if we want to sell off part of the family, then we're selling off part of the family and deal with it. And I realize, like, that's not, like, I don't want to belittle how awful that is compared to modern corporate, but I also don't want to not acknowledge that who we are now is always influenced by where we come from, whether
Yes.
your family, your culture, your history, and that what our idea of what a leader looks like has been shaped by these things over time, that we are starting to realize how they've seeped in,
Yeah.
but that being a leader can get misconstrued as having punitive power
Yeah. And I
instead
think that,
of making change.
yes, because, I absolutely hate, I remember when they started using leader, the term leader for anybody. And I'm like, no, no, first of all, there is no, you don't become a leader. Like, you don't get promoted into a leadership position. You get promoted into the job title that you're gonna get to, right? So if you become a boss, you don't become a
Mm-hmm.
leader, right? Like, and I think that that's where the mentality is. Are we referring to people as leaders, but still expecting that they perform jobs as their bosses, as managers, and not as actual leaders? And because a leader will not have the issue to have the conversation, a leader will not have the issue of leading the changes, and but it's so, to me, and we, especially nowadays, and again, I speak from the industry that I've been, right, that in hospitality, after the pandemic, there is such a massive exodus, right? Like, a lot of good people left the industry, and so now people are just getting promoted with not a lot of experience, not enough know-how, don't know how to be leaders. So there's like leaders that are not leaders, not training people who don't know how to be leaders, and
And if
everybody
I
should
can
also have a
just interject
responsibility.
real quick while you're on it, because this word is, and we have always had leaders put in positions who did not know how to handle these issues,
Oh yeah.
the culture, the people, the
No,
diversity issues,
and
and
now,
managing
and
people who
that's
are
the thing.
different.
And now they are, because again, right, and we've been talking about this for a while now, where the expectations of the workforce is different. They do
Mm-hmm.
expect you said this the other day, that you demand more hours of my day, you demand more of my mental health, you better be worth it. Like, what are you doing
Mm-hmm.
for me? And the companies, they're still not, the environments, they're not understanding that. So when you put people in leadership positions that don't know how to deal with these topics, what are you expecting it to happen? And as you said, that things are just going to go away, that if we just don't talk about it, and we've just push it to human resources, push it to human resources, and they can have a sit down conversation with you, have a conversation. But then again, I have brought stuff up to human resources, and what they did, instead of actually having a conversation with the person, they said, like, nope, they told the person to have a conversation with me. I'm like, that's not how this is
And
supposed
it's to
to
keep you
work.
quiet. It's not to resolve the issue.
No,
And I
it's like,
think that go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, I didn't need an apology because he wasn't against me. I was being an ally of the person who he was talking about. And the fact that human resources decided that he should come and apologize to me about it, I was like, I don't need an apology from you. I told him, I was like, I don't, you said it. I don't think it was right. So I brought it up to who I thought was the person who would handle that. Otherwise, I would have told you, which I did, not in the, I did say I didn't think that was appropriate, but at the time, but then I also brought the issue to human resources, who then turned it, and I'm like, so, and this conversation has been happening for a while too, of like, where is HR for the people, HR for the company, who is HR on the side of, right? And I think, you know, again, that's why they changed the term from like people services to, and again, you change the term, you change the name, but you don't change what they do. It drives me crazy.
It's a lot. Yeah,
Uh,
it's part of that fake facade that we've talked about.
yes.
That it's like treating your employees
Oh,
like
they're not
children
employees,
playing
they're
peekaboo.
associates, they're colleagues now. But that doesn't change how you treat them,
But it's like
giving people
thinking
a
we all
different
play
name.
peekaboo still. It's like we all think if you do this that you're not there. You know what I mean? If
Oh,
you change the name, it's something different. But I think it's frustrating because when you look at the past 100 years, I do this when I train on culture. What are the past 100 years of leadership in the US? 100 years ago, there was the great man theories. That was what leadership is. And I bring this up because what you're talking about now of leadership not being a title, that's only been in like the past decade that's
Oh
really
yeah.
been like an accepted
Yeah.
current idea of leadership, because it was the great man, and it was that people have certain traits that they're born with, and that's what makes a great leader. And one of them was height. And let me tell you, in 1920s, it wasn't men with dark skin either.
Oh yeah.
Like let's just be honest, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then it shifted from, okay, some people who are tall maybe don't know what they're doing. They have these traits and they're not necessarily great leaders. So maybe it's people who know how to drive people and inspire them towards a mission. And that's like a little bit closer, right?
Yeah.
But then not every mission is great, because in the 1940s, there was some guy in Germany who drove people towards a mission,
True. True.
and that was like, would we call him a lead? I mean, technically he was,
True.
but
And listen,
not one we want to
correct.
motive,
Yeah.
you
Yep.
know? And
We do
and
not
we
want
keep
to say that he
shifting.
was a great leader. No, we definitely don't.
So, and then we keep shifting, and where we're at now is more like transformational leadership. There are multiple styles of leadership, and like you said, that leadership doesn't come with the title. That you can exhibit traits of leadership without having a title, and that having a title doesn't necessarily make you a leader. And so,
Yes.
again, as we've talked about in other episodes, with businesses and industries that have survived by adapting to technology and change, and not just enforcing their way. We talked about media, print versus online.
Yep.
I think there's also this idea that leadership has changed, and that we've tried to move from what we were talking about earlier, these historic roots of that there's only one type of person who has a leader, and that it's power completely controlling someone. I mean, plantation owners,
Yep.
to that's not a leader, and that's not inherently a right that you have. And this is who we want to follow. So that's just my nerding on that.
No,
I do want
and
to.
go ahead.
I was just going to say I do want to get to some positives on allyship. Like, what does that actually look like? But I want you to finish your thought, of course.
No, I was just gonna say that, and just that the leaders now, right? Whoever they call these people leaders, they do need to be comfortable being uncomfortable with these conversations, right? And being that
Yeah.
person. I was reading an article, and then it said something about how this law firm, they interview a black female partner, and they said that her best ally was a white man that was there, that he holds space for her, right? So every time that she could confide in him, she could talk to him, she could also ask him questions about that environment of a white man,
She got
environment.
mentorship.
And yes, so I think that
Mhm.
that is where people can make a difference, right? If you don't know how. So they gave like three appropriate responses, right? So if you be thoughtful and sincere, it's like, I recognize I have to work to do. So if you don't know what to do, say like recognizing that you do have to do a work, and you have you have a work to do. How can I make this right? Right? Like, so asking the question, if somebody brings it up
Yeah.
to you, be like, hey, and I believe you, because as a woman, the amount of times I was told that, well, that's not what he meant. That's not what she meant. That is not. And I'm like, it doesn't matter, because that's how it made me feel. And it was how they said it, because you're not the person that said it. And you were not in that room to have that conversation. So again, right? Like, I believe you. And I think that solves a lot of problem, because then people don't feel like they can't bring issues up, because that's one of the things. The moment I say like, well, are you sure, like, then why would you come talk to me again? as a leader, right? Like if I say, I'm not saying like, oh, I believe you, let's go fight this person, right? But I believe you. I believe that you feel like that. I believe that this is truly was affected you in some way. So let's understand it and then take it from there, and not push it to HR for the love.
I like that you gave those interpersonal examples. And, when I give my keynote where I talk about the tendency to divide into two sides, I call it the sports mindset. Yeah, I talk about how to have courageous conversations. That's what I call them. I'm talking to people about things that are uncomfortable and that you may have opposing views on, and how that's an ongoing conversation. It is rarely one and done. And one of the things that I go over in that talk before I go over step by step how to have courageous conversations is the difference between shame versus accountability. And
Yeah.
I know we've touched on that a little bit, but it's such a huge difference, because shame is saying you are bad. Accountability is saying what you did was bad and I want you to make it right.
Yep.
And that's how we're productive, because as we've said before, when I got into this work environment, I told you about earlier, they were already having problems. They brought me in and they were just like, let's see what the white girl does, right? Like that was already a workforce that was divided into, we're not changing anything and nothing you can do will be good enough. And it was so hard to make any progress there, because they were not just bullying each other, they were bullying within their own groups. Then it got broken down into the who can be more woke, or who can be more of a leader. I mean, like these competitions, these battles on who is more ethical or who is more smart, and instead of just having conversations and learning from each other and moving forward. Yeah. And I think that comes with shame, because it comes from the fear of shame, because people are afraid, like you said, they're afraid to get canceled, and they're afraid that if they do something, it'll never be enough, so they just don't do anything. And so, but to do that, to have accountability, we have to be able to have humility. We have to be able to say, I didn't mean to do that. I want you to know I didn't mean to, but I did.
But I
did.
I
know that now. I know that now.
Yeah.
And as you already said, how can I make it right?
Yeah.
And that's the interpersonal level. I would say, and this again, because I'm an IO, I would say there's also the institutional level, because something else that happened, again, the same workplace, and I've seen this in other places too, because they had already been just polarizing, moving farther and farther from each other, because this went on for so long, not acknowledged, that somebody coming in and being like, hey, let me listen to you. I've already said everything. I've already said, like, who are you? Go away. Right. And it's like several of them, because this is right at the beginning of the pandemic, several of them who were on the nothing you do is good enough side, who wanted change. They didn't know, because I was in the leadership meetings and they weren't there. They didn't know I kept them from getting fired right at the start of the pandemic, because money dropped, budgets were cut. Yeah. And I was like, I don't think we can find, I kept them from getting fired, and they were awful to me. I mean, workplace bullying, like I had never experienced before, and so immature. I mean, like Zoom bombing my meetings, my training, things like that, like crazy. Yeah, these were people who were like older than me, like very highly educated, all kinds of things. Like,
yeah.
And the thing is, and I didn't just say, well, I helped you keep your job, because then that's getting into saviorism. Yeah. Right? Then that's, how dare you treat me when I did one good thing? Right? And so I really resisted that. And it was it was rough. It was difficult for me mentally. But by refusing to play into that, I slowly started to build this little space where people didn't have to be either or. And one of the other managers who initially, the first thing she ever said to me was that a presentation I did was a waste of her time. That was the first thing she'd ever said to me.
Where was that? I mean, please don't tell me, but like, don't say it here, but like that.
And I just responded, thank you for your honesty. What would make it better for you? And actually listen. And she was shocked. She like didn't know what to say. She was like, and then she was like, well, I just think some pre-reading would be helpful. And just make it a little shorter, so that would help you be able to make it shorter, and then I could just do pre-reading because it was just a long time to sit. And I was like, okay, I can do that next time.
Yeah.
And then I did. That's the important part. And then I did. Right. And eventually I started gaining the trust. And that doesn't mean that you accept it. I mean, they also threw a lot of things at me that I was like, no, that's not going to work. And here's why. Right. Or maybe next time this does seem like the great fit for it. But it slowly started to build a space of it's okay to not be on one team.
Yeah.
It's okay to like have conversations. And I feel like I'm rambling. I'm trying to get to the point of there's always going to be interpersonal backlash. And that's important to learn. Am I hearing that I'm harming someone? Because you always want to listen for that. Or am I hearing distraught? Am I hearing despair? Am I hearing frustration?
Yeah.
Because if your outcomes are still good, and process and outcomes matter, but like in this case, this particular example, I was still getting Zoom bombed by other managers. But the people they supervised, our retention was going up, like way, way up. And we were getting far better feedback. And they weren't doing the job performance barriers anymore. They were doing their job. They were doing it well. They were staying.
Yeah.
They weren't sending emails to higher ups threatening. I mean, like, you know what I mean? So it was like,
Yeah.
you have to take all of your information. And on the flip side of that, a lot of DEI programs fail because interpersonally you're like, but I'm so nice. But you're not making an impact. You
Yeah.
didn't change enough things that it mattered to them, so it felt performative. So I think it's important to look at both, and the interpersonal is still important, and process and outcome matter. I think just we are in such a polarized world that you're always going to run into somebody who disagrees with you, and you need to look at, am I making a change that is actually better? Because
Yeah.
that other person might just be jealous, to be honest.
Yeah. And, I unfortunately have been through a few, but two of them really come to mind when you think of like a toxic work environment that really did a number on my mental health and did a number on me as a whole. And looking back, I'm always like, was it just like a couple of people but they were so intense about it
They were so loud.
that I allowed my impression of the entire place to be a negative one, right? Because
Yes.
yes, but I think what bothers me the most of those situations, right? One of them wasn't. One of them was truly the vast majority of people, because it was just the culture that was bad. But is that how is it that these people are allowed to do what they do in front of everybody and
And that's
still
where the research on that one toxic team member can ruin the whole team.
yeah, and it's like how is it that that is allowed, right? Like, and so we are so afraid of having conversations, right?
Mhm.
Saying like, dude, you can't say it like that. That is rude. That is not okay. That is being, I had a boss like that. That how dare you talk to me like that? You know what I'm saying? Like, how dare you talk to anybody like that? Now, granted, do I think he liked himself? No, but that's not my department. You know what I'm saying? You should,
But it's not accountability to let people, because people get fired for anything. We see that
I
with mass
know.
layoffs right now, but I've repeatedly seen in workplaces that it's not seen as a terminable offense to be a bigot or a bully. And
I know.
I don't think that should be the first response. I think there should always be feedback. I think there should always be, let's develop, strategies. Let's maybe send you to training, or let's,
Yeah.
listen to your side. Was this a person a bigot to you, etc. But I have been and this has been across my experience, private, public, academic sectors, all of it. It is just never seen as a fireable offense. And that is not accountability. And we are the US is one of the few countries in the world, one of the few developed countries that does not have anti-bullying laws for the workplace. And there's a great book called The Bully at Work. It's by Namie and Namie, and they run the Workplace Bullying Institute. The U.S. only allows legal action if you can prove it was related to a protected class, like race, gender, etc. But proving that is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And you have to have the money to do it. But Namie and Namie, these global bullying researchers, argue that if you are the employer and you know this is happening, this bullying, this harassment, whatever, then you are responsible.
And that's why we
Because
go through all these
it's
trainings.
not that the bully isn't also responsible, but it is that you have silently sided with the bully because
Yeah.
you've known and did nothing. And the irony is you shot yourself in the foot. And workplaces lose great employees. The only thing you can do as an employee in the US with that situation is leave. And
And
that's
it's
not
sad
a
and
win for anybody.
yeah. And either you leave or you stay in an environment that destroys your mental health. Literally.
And you're also not able to perform as well. Like
And
that's
that's what I'm saying, because you're so,
yeah.
and this is like from personal experience, even like, and yeah, but we're going away from the topic, from
Well,
allyship.
it's also a form of allyship to hold people accountable to that you can't do that kind of behavior here. And that can
Oh
be
yeah, like that you
that can
can
be
be an
across
asshole.
that
That's
can be
just
across yeah, because there are so many all of us, I would say all of us are privileged in some way. And all of
yeah.
us are marginalized in another. And but I think we are all very bad at looking at where we are privileged, and we only look at where we're marginalized. It's very weird how people want to point out they're the biggest victim. I don't know why we do that. I'm a psychologist. I don't know why we do that. Instead of saying, this is where I struggle. This is where the system isn't helping me. This is where it is. How can I help somebody else? And then maybe they'll help me.
Yeah.
And even if they don't, then I know I helped somebody else. It didn't
Yes.
take away, it didn't hurt this other part. It didn't take away from it.
Yeah.
And that is something. So Bell Hooks is a Black feminist scholar who had amazing writing. Are you familiar with Bell Hooks?
No.
Oh my God, she's amazing. I have literally one of my friends gave me a Bell Hooks candle with a prayer for writers, like she's a saint. It looks like a Catholic candle because I grew up Catholic, so she thought it was funny. And she's like light, and it has like a prayer for writers. She's like, write this while you're working on your report. And girl, I do. I'm like, please, Bell, help me. And she opens her book, Ain't I a Woman, which is about Black women, with going through how over the past like 50 years, over the decades, the US has switched from women's rights or Black rights, women's rights or Black rights.
Yeah.
And how the Black rights movement focused mostly on Black men, and how the white women's movement focused on rich white women, and how everybody else, and not how everybody else was screwed, but how both required the support and benefited from the support of Black women, and both betrayed them. And that just breaks my heart. That's part of if you keep everybody's hurt, right? If you keep these groups divided, then we can never get to all of these things connect, like racism and sex, and it all connects. Racism, sexism, classism, we're all hurt by these things. Yeah. But we fight each other instead of the problem. And that's not saying all of them are the same or that they require the same response. It's just realizing that other people have different experiences and it matters. Like,
it's so funny. You're saying how, how women, it's either women's issue or Black, like I remember being in a meeting once and we were talking about women's issues, and there was a white man, part of the LGBTQ plus community, and he's like, wow, you didn't have as hard as we did. And I'm like, I'm sorry,
this isn't a competition.
This is not a competition. And no, you don't know if I haven't had, because you are a white man.
Also, you can be a woman and queer.
So it's like, but it's just, I just think that there's always, as you said, right, there's always this competition of, no, I have it worse. No, I have it worse. No, I have it worse. I had somebody, which I would try to stay as try to state what happened very carefully. But I had this white man turn to me and say that he was also a second class citizen because to me, who is a female Latina, he was
An
not treated
immigrant.
properly because he was immigrant, because he was not from this country. And I'm
But
like,
you're
you
also
are,
an immigrant.
yeah, but I mean, but he said that he was treated worse than me. And I'm like, you are a white man. If you don't say where you're from, you are a white man. Like you
Oh,
are
I
a
see what
white man.
you're
But he was
so,
trying
and
to
that's,
tell me that he had it worse than me, who is a very, I am Latina. I'm a woman to begin with. I'm a woman and you're not.
and I mean, the irony of that is that you're an immigrant.
Yeah.
So, but there are degrees of, and I run into this. Oh my God, I run into this all the time because I do unwritten rules of work, right? That's my thing, and I look at the different groups and who it's different for. And people always get in fights in my comments on if the unwritten rules for other groups are as real as their unwritten rules. And I'm
Yep.
like, we don't do that here.
No.
With the whole premise of unwritten rules is that it varies.
Yeah.
It's the assuming that there's one right way, and some people know it and other people don't to varying degrees. And so, like, I'm sure, and privilege is always relative. Like, compared to me, who is a US citizen, I'm a woman, I'm not an immigrant. It depends on the context. He can probably walk down the street safer at night because he's a man.
Yeah.
But I'm more likely to get hired easier because I have citizenship. Like it's not this blanket, and
Yeah.
why, and I just don't understand the motive behind why he would even say to you, I have it
I
harder.
don't
And I
even
say
know
that as a
why.
white woman, realizing that like a lot of white women do this about being a woman versus race or being a woman versus other things. And I truly, as the psychologist in me, is like, why do we do that?
Yeah. But and again, right, is the whole thing like my pain is always going to be stronger than your pain regardless, right? I did a when I did that speaking event a couple weeks ago, it was interesting because I tell my story and how my the whole thing to me is like overcoming fear. That fear is not the fear of the thing itself. It's you're not afraid of the actual thing, you're just afraid of fear in itself. So if you can conquer the fear, you can start conquering everything else. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the whole point. But it comes, so I tell my story, and then right after me was another speaker who she starts with literally her conversation, her story starts with, and I look back, I was driving, I look back, my 2-month-old baby is having what it seemed like a seizure, take her to the hospital, and then she find out she has like a terminal disease. And I'm like, we did like our prep, like we did like the rehearsals, like nobody can top that, right? Like but then as we were talking, like somebody else was talking how she had 3 father figures in her life, but none of them were actually there for her. Everybody has different pain.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's pain is different. And the reason why we can't say that my pain is worse than yours, then my pain is better than yours, or even compare, is because, especially in this work that we do as speakers, right? I'm trying, people are not, I don't have children. So even though I can only imagine what you went through, I can't relate to.
Mm-hmm.
So your story, even though it's very, uh, very emotional and very sad, and I love how you overcame that, it's not relatable to me because I can't relate to that, right? But like
But it has its niche, but that means there's a niche for something else.
but that's the thing. So it's not about who has the most suffering, who has the most pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply about we are human beings having our own experiences, and how can we help each other, right? In some level that we can make it better, right? So like how me as a female immigrant Latina can help other females or even other men that don't feel
Mm-hmm.
as confident, because again, I talk a lot about courage, I talk a lot about confidence, and that
Mm-hmm.
how many white men do I know that have no confidence? And if they did have
Mm-hmm.
confidence, they would be better leaders. They would be people, because then you would have the confidence to stand up. You make a much better.
True confidence and not just
Yeah.
cocky, because boys are
No,
pressured to be
not
cocky.
arrogance. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
no. Because this
Yeah.
is something I talk a lot about. Like, we mistake confidence for arrogance, which are very different.
Mhm.
And that is the problem. When we say I'm confident, I'm not confident. I'm not saying that I'm arrogant, right? Like, I understand that I'm confident and humble, right? Those two things can go
Mhm.
together, but arrogance and humbleness can't. So it's the first set that we're looking for: confident and humble, knowing that I am good at the things that I know I'm good at, and I'm humble enough to know that I'm not good at everything, and I'm willing to learn that from, and grow from there. And the
And the
goal is not.
irony is cockiness is an outcome of insecurity, right?
So,
Not
and
being
I
confident.
think, but yeah, but I feel like if we really tap into that and be like, if I'm confident that I know what I know, and I'm humble enough to learn from what I don't know, then I can be a better leader. I can do my best to try to serve all groups of people and try to make a difference on their lives. You, oh, no,
There we
can't.
go.
No, there you go.
No?
Yes.
Okay, I think it just timed out because we are getting close here. Um, I will say I agree with you, and I think that what you described is all that adaptability that employees are told to strive for, that we need to remember when we're leaders to also keep striving for, because stagnation is, and I'm not like promoting hustle culture, but just being stagnant,
No.
you're gonna run into problems. And so I think just to highlight, I highlighted that the problems, the anti-allyship is not saying what the problem is, saying we hear you, and then taking no action, and then not showing up when things get uncomfortable. Like I've literally seen a leader avoid a scheduled like intervention because they had a dentist appointment. That was their excuse. You know how reschedulable that is?
Yeah.
That's not allyship. And allyship is what you do when there's not even the marginalized group in the room. Which,
Yeah.
if there's not one in the group,
Especially, that's
yeah,
when
if
you
there's
do
not one in
it.
the room, you got a lot of work to be doing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
then what I wanted to highlight
Just
as
very true.
effective is, we said don't put all the labor on that person. That is a lazy way out. We'd say learn yourself what you need to do, and don't just learn from other allies. Learn from the source.
Yeah.
Learn from that group. Listen to that group. Read their writings. Like, that's what I love bell hooks for. I was going to do research that included Black women. I absolutely needed to read more bell hooks. I absolutely needed to read more Toni Morrison. Like, I needed to be familiar with what are the
And
issues
go
with Black
after the
women, be culturally
information. Yeah.
aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't just need to read it from other white women. I'm already a white woman. And 3, focusing on accountability and not shame. And to receive that, you have to also give that to others. If you want grace when you're wrong and held accountable, to give it to others as well.
Yeah. And I
And
think
so,
what you said earlier was that I really like, and I think that this is something that people should take, people in positions of leadership, take this. And truly, when you say something that somebody say, hey, first of all, be open to take feedback. And by being open to take feedback, it's not just like, oh, my door is always open, you can tell me whatever. Is when people tell you something, you say, I am sorry, that's not, as you mentioned, that's definitely not what I meant, but I did say it.
but I did it.
But I did
Mm-hmm.
say it. I'm sorry that I said that. That's not my intention. How can I make this better? Like, how can I improve on that? And mind you, right? Like, there's a big movement now about uh, stop giving, especially like women, the task, right? Like, married man would say, like, tell me what you need to help around the house. Like, you can
Right.
see
You
they're
live here too.
right. So I think it's the same principle of like not ask like what can I do better, but like I will do better, right? Like, and please continue to tell me if I'm not doing better. But then make that part of your job, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
job are not just your tasks, but be a better person, be a better leader, be a better just co-worker to people. That's also part of your job. Be a better human being. It's also part of your job. It's part of
And
everybody's job.
I know it's a lot of work. Like, as I said at the beginning of this, it's a lot of work to unlearn.
Yeah.
And you know, and you have to confront some of your own trauma to do it. But I would honestly say I have never been happier than when I worked through that. Because
Yeah.
when we have to feel power over people in a very condescending way, we're not happy.
No.
When we need to control other people and not work with them and collaborate, we're not happy.
And just say like
And
the whole nice, right? You said earlier too, like the whole, oh, but I'm nice. But I'm nice. We talked about
but I'm
this last
nice.
time, right? But I'm nice. But it doesn't matter because we can, people can read through it. And now because these topics are so fresh, people can spot them. People can spot when people are being dishonest. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
worse. It's just shut up. Just don't say anything. If you don't have anything nice, just shut up. Don't make the joke. If I can give an advice to every white man out there, you don't need to make the joke. Do you understand this? You don't. You don't need to be the funny guy. You do not need to be the one that makes the smart little comment at the end of it. You don't. You don't. Just shut up. You don't. Oh, the amount of times that like we're in the meeting and it's like, why do you think that was appropriate? Why?
So I think I've mentioned I'm reading a book called Humor at Work and Why Humor is Important at Work. But
No.
something that
Not in that sense. Not
no, but
jokes.
here's
Jokes
something
are
that I
fun.
don't know. Are you familiar with the comedian Matt Rife?
The what? Sorry.
The comedian Matt Rife.
No.
So he got famous on TikTok for his really good crowd work, and then he did a stand-up special, and
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do know him. Yes.
I mean, and it opened with a domestic violence joke. And the thing is, you know, because there's the whole like, what is comedy, and you know, comedians make fun of sometimes dark things, and obviously some of those things shouldn't be at work because, like, it's
Yeah.
we are who we are at work, and I think it's just you have to build trust, right? And comedians who do that really well have built trust with the public. But when the brunt of the joke is just she got punched, that's not funny.
Yeah.
Like if there was no joke about it, it was just like, and so she's getting beat up. And what's the funny part? No, that was it. Okay, so it seems like you just kind of use this as a platform to just
Yeah.
say something terrible then. So I think that if you don't know that difference, certainly do not be making jokes at
No,
work
I like
until you
don't make
do.
a joke that somebody, about I don't know. I just can't. Sometimes I look back at places I worked and I'm like, how what? Like no, that was never okay. And at any point that was not okay. But especially nowadays. But yeah, we are coming
When
to
I
our
finish this book, we should do an episode on humor at work. That'll be
yes,
fun.
please. I would love to do that. Because I would like to say that I'm funny,
I don't
but
know that I'm
not.
funny, but I'm definitely a goof. So I definitely appreciate when other people are, and I think everything should be funny when possible. So
Yeah, I do too.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, we were all over the place tonight, and
Yes,
but it
but
was a
are we not?
cool.
I think I love. That's why I
True,
love our conversations because we don't.
true.
Because life is
Everything
like that. It's not a linear thing. We are
everything's
multifaceted
connected.
people. Everything's happening
Yeah.
at the same time. So cool.
Well, anything you want to say before we close out?
I will put some resources on the main post of the two articles about that. I really like those articles about how to be a better ally. I'll just put them on the actual post.
On
Um,
LinkedIn?
yes, I'll just put them
Okay.
on LinkedIn. And again, right, it just really comes from a place of genuinely caring about your fellow human beings, regardless of who they are. So
If you
that's
can
all.
send me those links, I'll put them on the YouTube as well.
Okay, sounds good. I will certainly do that.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Well, everybody have a good night and happy Juneteenth.
Happy Juneteenth.